would just add that the city has requested that we meet, so I think that in the next couple of weeks we'll have
The foundation, Scholarship Foundation Committee will meet next Monday, so I'll have something to do next month.
Thank you. Recognition. Educator of the Month, October 2019, Dr. Ford.
Thank you, President Urias. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to the Barbara Webster Principal, Mr. Madrigal. All yours, Mr. Madrigal.
Thank you, board members. I want to say a few words about our classified person that we are honoring tonight. Her name is Erica Barrios. Erica is our health tech at Barbara Webster. Here's what I wrote. Erica is always there if you need a Band-Aid. You need some ice. If you don't feel good and you need to lay down, she's there. If you have a cough, you throw up. If you need someone to go through your long hair to see if you have lice, Erica Barrios is the one we turn to. And she never fails us. Through hot and cold and rain and blackouts and tears, Erica has provided comfort, safety, and security to our children and our staff. Just a quick story. A few years ago, we had an older male staff member who was having some blood pressure problems. Against his will, Erica convinced him to come up to the office daily to have his blood pressure checked because she was worried about it. So thank you, Erica, for your patience and your caring, and tonight we honor you with this award. Thank you.
you're not going to share some words with us? Okay, well, on behalf of the board, on behalf of the board, we'd like to give you the certificate, and thank you for your service to our district.
If you don't say anything, you'll be the only person in the district who hasn't said anything. You sure?
So I hope the board doesn't mind. I took it upon myself to change the name of the award tonight just a bit. Tonight we get to honor Becky Contreras. I have known Ms. Contreras now for going on 7 years. However, Ms. Contreras has known our school, Barbara Webster, for over, I'm just going to say 50 years, Becky, because I know it's been longer than that. You don't want me to say the real amount of time. That's because for more years than Becky probably wants to think about, she has been a Barbara Webster Bobcat. You see, Becky went to grammar school at Barbara Webster. Becky's father was the principal of Barbara Webster. And when Becky got out of school, she decided she was going to follow her passion to become a dancer. But when that career ended, Becky decided to lend her passion and her devotion to teaching at Barbara Webster. You know, I like to think of Becky as the female version of Welcome Back, Carter. Not everybody got to take this. And therefore, this award is to honor Becky Contreras and her father for all of those years of service given to our Barbara Webster community. I called it a legacy award for Ms. Contreras. Ms. Contreras has informed us all that she will be retiring. So on behalf of the countless runny noses, confused and blank looks, smiling proud faces, on behalf of the countless children that you and your father have blessed, Becky, thank you, and we honor you and your family with this award.
Okay, so I guess we have to talk, right? Interesting he has said what he said, because as I look around the room, I see 3 students from my past. Can you stand up, please? My 3 students. Come on, come on. So Natalie's a student, and my current student that is a 2nd grader in my classroom right now, I have his mother. So it does continue, which is quite interesting. And also, I just want to say I'm really honored that I'm part of Santa Paula Elementary School District. Oh my gosh, Unified School District, and especially Barbara Webster, because I do consider Barbara Webster my home. I was there as a child. I was there as a young child. I was there in middle school running around, and my dad was there. So Barbara Webster does feel like home to me. And thank you to all those people that came out to support me, people I've worked with, and family members. And most importantly, Rudolph, my husband, because without him, I couldn't do all the things I do in Barbara Webster. He kind of holds down literally the camp. So that's, I guess, it. Thank you. Thank you. Well, you know what? Why can't I hope all my people who came to support me? Come on! Please, where's Louise go? She's here. Meister, come on!
Ready? 1, 2, 3. And 1, 2, 3. Another one. 1, 2, 3.
And 5,
Yes, for our next item, Dr. Cole.
Thank you, President Urias. Lastly, each month we are recognizing our schools one at a time, and the schools that are recognizing their classified and certificated employees of the month are also highlighting a student program at their school site. So at this time, I'm going to once again introduce Barbara Webster Principal, Mr. Madrigal.
Thank you, Board, and I will be brief. Just to start off, the philosophy of Barbara Webster in regards to our social emotional work and structures is we view inappropriate student behaviors, inappropriate student choices, just as we view mistakes in math. We see these as opportunities to learn and grow. So what you have there in front of you is one of our structures. We call it a reflection form. Reflection form is designed to get students to go through a metacognitive process. And I know that's a big word, but it's basically thinking about thinking. It's understanding yourself. If you can understand yourself and you can understand the triggers that trigger you, your emotions, and how you react to them, you have a better chance of either hitting those emotions off the pass or knowing how to deal with those emotions. So I'd like just very briefly to take us through a reflection form. So let's all assume that student X has made an inappropriate choice. So if you look at the top there, it says, my action. And let's assume that student X has called someone else a bad word. Not that that would ever happen in any of the schools, but let's assume that they have. The next part is the where did it happen on the yard. So the adult who's doing this and guiding them through it is getting this information. You see, in the old days, and I was guilty of this many times, student X comes in, they're flustered, they're angry. What did you do? Why did you do it? It's that voice. What did you do? Why did you do it? I'm annoyed, I got things to do, and now you're sitting in front of me. This form and the work that we have done has totally transformed how I do this. Now I look at it as, okay, we've made a mistake. How can we work through this? I would never yell at a student if they missed a math problem. Why would I yell at a student or get upset? I've never yelled. Why would I get upset at a student because they made an inappropriate choice? It's part of growing up. We've all done it. We've all been there. So it's helped to change my view of this. Next step. How did I feel right before I did that? So important. This is where the metacognition starts. And if you look on the edges, you'll see all those little emotions there, the emojis. Let's assume that student X was mad. Happens a lot of times out in the yard or even in the classroom. The student must first admit what they did, and this is still a little bit old school. Before I can teach you that 2 plus 2 is 4 and not 5, you've got to admit that 2 plus 2 is 4. If you keep saying it's 5, then we're at it. I'm just going to have to wait you out so you agree that 2 plus 2 is 4. So you have to admit that you made a mistake, which 99.9% of them do. The next step is, what was I feeling? Now this is different for the students. They're not used to being asked what they felt. It takes a minute, we guide them through it, and oftentimes they'll say, either I felt silly, or I felt nervous, or I felt scared, I felt angry. They identify the emotion themselves. For our very young students, we do have to help them, but we have done this with kindergartners. The next thing was my thoughts. This is hard for some of the younger kids, and sometimes we bypass this piece. But let's assume that the student says, I was mad because student X was cheating at a ball game. Happens a lot out in the yard. That's what got me mad. The next part was very new to me, and I had to be taught this. It's called the function. What did you want? When all of us make mistakes, when all of us do things that we wish we hadn't done, it's because we wanted something. Often it doesn't have to do with the thing that we actually did. If I call you a name, I really didn't want to call you a name. I wanted something else. And we help the student identify this. Often it is to get someone back, to get my way, because I was impatient. So we have some ideas on here for the student to think through. Sometimes the student would just say, I don't know. And that's when you got to do the work. That's when you got to wait them out, you got to talk to them about it, and then most of the time the students will identify. In this case, let's say he wanted to get someone back. Revenge is a big deal when you're very young. It's like the scales of justice. They just have to be right. And when I don't have a lot of tools in my tool bag, you hit me, I hit you back. Now we're fair. We know as adults that that doesn't work. It just leads to both people being blind. But Young children do not have a lot of tools in their tool bag, and so this is part of giving them those tools. The next part is where the learning comes in, a replacement behavior. The next time you feel angry and you want to get someone back, you think that the best way to do it is to call them a name. What else can you do instead? Speak to a teacher. That's the number one thing we ask you to do. Come and get help from us. But there's other things in there, which kids will often choose. Ask to tell a good joke. Student yells out in class, they really wanted the attention. Ask the teacher will give them space. Ask for a break. These are new tools that we're giving our kids that they can hopefully use as they get older. The last piece there on this page is a sentence frame. The next time I feel mad, they already have thought this all through, and I want to say a bad word, I will speak to a teacher. Because, and here's where the long pause comes in, and this is the deep learning. Why? I once had a teacher at my high school, I was a student at a Catholic high school, ask me, why are we good? What's the point of it? Well, because we're told, Catholic kids. And he said, that's the Reader's Digest version of being good. I'm just good because it's so good to be good. He wanted us to think deeper, and that's what the because is. Sometimes they'll say, because I didn't want to get in trouble. And I'll say, oh, okay, I understand that. So if nobody had caught you, would that have been okay? So in other words, if somebody hits you, and we don't know about it, everything's fine. No, absolutely not. So they have to think a little deeper. So many times we get, and in this case, because I didn't want someone to feel bad. I don't want to make people feel bad. That's the final piece, that's the learning. If you turn the page over, that's for the student. But the last piece for all of us when we wrong somebody is the apology. There's been a lot of studies about this. Apologies are very powerful, not just for the victim, but for the perpetrator. It helps close the loop. It helps you feel whole again as a perpetrator. Studies show that if you feel guilt, you don't apologize, you hold on to that guilt, there is a high percentage that you will do that thing again. We're trying to avoid that. So, dear X, today I felt mad, I wanted to get back at you, so I called you a bad word. Would you like to express how that makes you feel? And I've seen this happen over 100 times now. Kids are facing each other, they're reading this to each other, and the victim child will be honest. They'll say, I felt like crying, or I felt scared, or I felt angry at you. And there's just kind of a moment of pause there between the two kids. And then the perpetrator says, or the young person says, I'm sorry for my actions. Next time I feel mad, and I want to call someone a bad word, I will speak to a teacher. Because I don't want to make people feel bad, sincerely. They sign. So I wanted to share that process with you. We go through these daily. There's no limit on the number of these that we do with a single child, because there's no limit to the amount of teaching that we do on a daily basis for anyone. And it's just one of the pillars of our socio-emotional work. If anybody has any questions at the end, I hope I was free. Go ahead.
Mr. Brent, I have a quick question. Have you, since you started, how long have you been doing this now? How many years?
2 years.
Have you kept any data to see if there's any positive difference?
Yes. So we have something at our school called an emodometer. And that's one of the goals of the superintendent this year. The emodometer is connected to our Hello Yellow system. Our Hello Yellow system is students can check in anytime during the day if something is bothering them, and they can check in with any adult on campus. It's a one-way system, so they can talk to us, but we can't talk to them through the system, thereby forcing us to go and make a connection with that kid. So the other day I got something and a child said, directly to me, I don't want to say the kid's name, X is bothering me, can you help me? And so I went and checked in with him, but he sent it to multiple people. So while I was checking in with him, I didn't realize that somebody else was coming. 2 people showed up to help this child deal with this issue, and I could tell he felt safe and comfortable. To answer your question, at the beginning, and we're still sort of at the beginning, it revealed a lot that we didn't know was going on, and it tripled our workload. Because a lot of stuff was going on that we just didn't see. I've noticed this year, at this point, that they're starting to decline. My goal is on this emodometer, when students check in on Hello Yellow, the system is able to identify key words, if they're negative words or positive words. And it judges month to month on a meter. It's a happiness meter, a contentedness meter. My goal is to try to keep that thing over at 80%. We noticed that last year during testing, it dipped to like 60%. because it gets them nervous and anxious about testing at the end of the year. At the beginning of the year, it's like 90%. Everybody's really happy for the first month. And then about this time, it starts to dip. So we're keeping track of that. We're hoping that we're eliminating a lot of the things that we didn't see, the underground things that we didn't see. Yes, I do think it's helping.
Thank you.
Okay, now it's time for public comments. Members of the public that wish
Microphone.
To address the board, must first complete a speaker form. Speaker forms must be submitted no later than 5 minutes prior to the topic coming up for discussion on the agenda. When addressing the Board of Trustees, please stand and be recognized by the board president, state your full names, and direct your comments to the entire board. Please limit remarks to 3 minutes for all presentations unless otherwise informed. In accordance with Education Code 35145.5, the board cannot enter into a formal discussion or make a decision on any matter not on the agenda for this meeting. So let's get started. Jeanette Ortega.
Good evening, parents, board members, people in cyber world. Mr. Markgraf touched on admitting you're wrong. I hope the teachers and administrators do the same. We want the children to do because children don't have tools to do, and we as parents have to assist them. I made a phone call to Maricel Fabiola concerning my son at ISPAL. He was trying to go the wrong way in life, going to the gangs, so I reached out to her, requesting assistance for my son. I request this assistance as a desperate parent who lived right in the hub of the gang territories. There was just 2 shootings 1 block away from my house on each side this past week. I was told by her I would get the assistance I requested. 1 week later, my son disappeared after flogging. As you can imagine, we were distraught. The next day we located him and an officer came out and talked with us and him. In this conversation I found out the assistance I asked for never took place. On Tuesday, I sent an email to her, and about an hour later, the school police called me. The conversation was not pleasant. I felt as if he was very negative, amongst other things that he did and told me. I've had much trouble in this district with support of various issues. I feel as if administrators do not want to deal with severe issues and just ignore it. I called Ms. Fabiola several times, left messages, and yet had no messages or calls from her. Last week, my son was caught at school with a vape pen. Do you know what consequences he received? Anybody? Nothing. No consequences at all. They did nothing to him. He was given a contract for bad grades. My son was given a detention. He was caught lingering in the hall a couple days later. For that, he got a 30-minute detention. Today I received a phone call, frantic, from my daughter from the high school. Mom, we're on lockdown. I was going up the stairs and I had to just dart into some random room. I just had to go in there. She was distraught. I said, okay, let me try to figure out what's going on. As I hang up the phone, I received a phone call from Ms. Fabiola. Ms. Fabiola called me about 12:40. School was going to be over at 1:50. And she stated to me that my son's shorts and his socks were 1 finger too long. And that he had to stay in the office. Mr. Calloway said, why don't you just pull your socks down? And she said, no, he has to change his socks. There's some really severe issues in this district with priorities. And the way these teachers and administrators just say, I choose to give him this punishment for this, and I choose not to give him punishment for that.
Thank you, Mrs. Ortega. Ann Pettis. So I'm here to address the issue of the high school band room. We currently have 48 choir members and 115 band members. The limit in the room is 114. So that means all the band kids and their instruments do not fit in there at one time when they do have to have rehearsals all together. And the band boosters, we have been discussing this and would like to offer a solution for the board to consider. That currently the old mechanic shop that now houses the robotics class would be a very good space for the band to move into, because it has multiple classrooms that currently are not being used. Most of it's being used to store broken furniture and things like that that really need to be just thrown out instead of held onto. And it also has a loading dock that would be great when you're traveling to competitions to load and unload the new trailer that the district got for us. Thank you very much. So with that, we feel that robotics could move into where the band currently is, and the other classroom would be, I believe there's a computer lab, and maybe another classroom is being used intermittently. My understanding is there's quite a few classrooms that are empty in the 200 area building, that maybe those other classes could be moved over there so that the music department, I should say, because that's the choir, that's the band, that's symphonic band, marching band, jazz band, as well as the color guard and the theater group. Because Jerry right now has no classroom. It'd be nice for him to have a classroom. So, thank you for your consideration. Thank you.
Yvonne Walker.
Hi there, good evening. My name is Yvonne Rockwell, and I'm a resident of Santa Paula, born and raised. And I'm here to raise awareness as well regarding the high school band and color guard. Again, there's 126 students that are represented in the color guard and the band. And one of our concerns is that, again, it is the student safety and the health are a concern. The current band room lacks sufficient ceiling height for the sound to resonate and release, and an average rehearsal with just one class in the current room, we gauged it, the decibels are at 112 decibels. That's the equivalent to a chainsaw. So really, really loud. And the concern is that the noise levels are very high and can have a long-term effect on the students and the staff. My son is a first-year band student here at Santa Paula. He is a transfer student from St. Bonaventure. And I have to tell you that I was so pleasantly surprised at how amazing this band program is. These kids work so hard, and they're so dedicated, and their sense of community is so beautiful amongst them. Just so you know, they took first place in the Fiesta Parade this summer. They were at a field competition in Palmdale on Saturday. They took 2 first place. One was for band, one was for color guard, and a 2nd place in percussions. So look at the newspaper. There's going to be lots of photos for you to take a look at. And like I said, these kids are working super, super hard. And it gives kids that are not necessarily athletics or playing football or volleyball, or, these are academic, it's an academic class. It gives them a place to go in a sense of belonging. And they are just magnificent students. They have to maintain their GPA in order to participate. So we really appreciate you listening to our comments tonight and appreciate you being aware.
Thank you. Lori Rockwell.
Hello, I'm Blair Rockwell, and I'm president of Santa Paula also. I'm bringing some awareness. We anticipate only 17 graduates moving on from the band this year. But we're anticipating 50 additional students joining the band. So those metrics that Mrs. Rockwell was sharing with you are only going to be magnified by the addition of additional students. That's just next year. If you look around at any of the events, you see all of these t-shirts, future band member of Santa Paula High School's band. They're promoting it, they're getting traction, they're getting a lot of excitement. If we're going to get potentially 50 plus next year and then continuing that momentum, we just need to think about where we're going to be in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. It's a successful program. There's going to get more and more students who are going to want to participate in it. And those trophies, they help. So, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Murillo.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Eric Murillo. I'm here as a parent of band kids. I'm also the vice president of the Band Booster Club, and I also wanted to share some words with you. In our community, everyone knows the names of Lou Lingo and Ed Rowena. They taught band in our communities for many years, and the band program under them always had some success. You look around in the Isabel Gym, especially in the band rooms, you see a lot of trophies from many different events. But just within the last 3 or 4 years, with the help of the band boosters that have kind of come together within the last 3 or 4 years, the hiring of Francisco Marquez last year, and the coming together of all the programs at the different levels from elementary to middle school with Mr. Neff and now Francisco Marquez, they're really starting to build something big. The success of the program and also the growth of the program is getting bigger and bigger every year. And up to this point, we've done a pretty good job as far as the booster organization and the community and band parents in supporting these kids at different events that we go to, like the Palmdale event that Ms. Rockwell spoke of. And we feed them, we make sure they have what they need. We've been providing payment to some of the coaches that we feel hopefully the school board will look to pay for in the future because the program is getting so big. Let's see. So again, the band is growing. We feel like we need more room for the kids to expand. We've touched on that already. And just another thing that to consider along with the space, you've heard the numbers of our kids from 126 next year to grow by up to 50 students. We're going to be running out of uniforms. We're going to be running out of instruments. So those are all things to consider in the years coming soon. I think everything else has been covered. So thank you again for your time, and we'll be seeing you soon again. Thank you.
Thank you. Javier Magaña. Mr. Magaña, you'll get up to 6 minutes. 3 in Spanish, 3 in English, for the English translation.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Javier Magaña. Soy, para los que no me conocen, soy un padre de familia. Tengo una niña aquí en Glen City y un niño en la Isabel.
My name is Señor Magaña. I have a child in Glen City and a child in Isabel.
Yo vengo a comentarles, yo tengo una preocupación muy grande respecto a lo que está pasando en Isabel. aclararles, mi hijo, gracias a Dios, en este momento va muy bien. Entonces no vengo por mi hijo, pero mi hijo está en Isabel y soy parte de la comunidad de Santa Paula. Y yo le pregunto al superintendente qué plan tiene inmediato, qué es lo que se está haciendo para corregir tanto problema que hay, porque ahorita sabemos que hay muchos problemas con los estudiantes y lastimosamente hay bastantes problemas. En estos 2 últimos años, cada vez más yo estoy mirando que la escuela va para abajo. Y otra vez, tristemente, yo ando por donde quiera, y tristemente los comentarios son completamente negativos hacia la escuela de Isabel. Y esto a mí no me gusta porque otra vez yo soy parte de la comunidad. Todas mis hijas han pasado por aquí, 4 ya salieron. Entonces vivo aquí y no me gusta que se hable mal. Y no es nada más que se hable, sabremos que hay problemas y bastantes problemas con los estudiantes. Y una de las cosas es que no es ni 1, ni 2, ni 3 padres a los que aparentemente les está ignorando. Entonces, ¿qué es lo que se está haciendo? Tenemos que buscar soluciones inmediatas. ¿Qué es lo que se va a hacer para levantar la escuela, para que no siga para abajo? Esa es mi preocupación. Se tiene que trabajar con...
I'm very concerned about what's going on at Isabel School. I'm a parent here in San Paulo, and I'm a member of the community, and I am very concerned over what's going on. I'm not here to talk about my child. My child is doing well. I'm concerned about the other students. I am everywhere here in San Paulo, and all over I hear very much discontent with what's going on in Isabel. In the last 2 years, there's been a lot of injurious problems, and I want to ask the superintendent what is planned to be done, because I see this as a very big problem, and I want to see Isabel come up and not go down.
Y por último, como les dije, me gustaría que no tiene que ser ahorita, pero que sí en un futuro se diera a saber qué es lo que se está haciendo, porque ya se tiene que hacer algo. Y creo que aquí tienen, en mi humilde opinión, con todo respeto, aquí ya entra el superintendente y qué es lo que está haciendo con los directores, porque ya no es a nivel director. Entonces, otra vez, se tiene que trabajar en esa directiva. Yo les pido el apoyo, tenemos que ver que, de veras, hay muchas cosas que a lo mejor se mantienen ocultas y eso no, creo yo que no es nada bueno para la comunidad. De veras, otra vez, con todo respeto se los digo, no es nada personal, ni mucho menos. Otra vez mi hijo va muy bien, pero no por eso. Entonces yo les pido la ayuda y el apoyo para que principalmente esta escuela sobresalga. Gracias.
I'm asking you for your support and also for your attention to this problem. I want to know what the superintendent is going to do and how they're going to work with the directors, because obviously the directors or the principals are not doing enough right now, and I want to see that things get better at Isabel School. Many times you may not know it. There's a lot of things that happen under the surface, and you're not aware of what's going on. But there's a lot, and I'm very concerned about what's going on in Isabel.
Y por último, no ignore to the parents, please, no ignorance. Eso es bien importante, no ignorar a los padres.
Sí.
Hay que involucrarlos.
With all due respect, please don't ignore the parents. It is nothing personal, but I am very concerned about the student body.
Gracias, señor Magaña. Patricia Valencia.
Solo si me necesita.
My name is Ora Gulini from the University of everyone here. My name is Patricia Valencia. I am here because I want to give you attention question the computers and tablets that our students are using every single day in all our schools right here in Santa Paula. How often these computers and tablets are disinfected? My question is because it's, how can I say, really bad stomach virus running around our whole district and impacts directly my whole family. And I get this virus myself at the Renaissance High School because currently I am attending an English class over there and I get this virus over there. And then I pass through my whole family. My kids miss some school days. My daughter missed 1 day of work. And this is a question that I made to only one school. I want to be honest. I just went and asked to one school, how often are computers and tablets disinfected? And they said, honestly, almost never. I think this is not safe for anyone. This is not safe for anyone, and this is impacting our community. And I am really, really concerned because I am an adult and I am afraid to go back and work in that computers because this virus is make you feel a couple of days later you die. It's really, really bad virus. I'm scared to go back. And I have the option to go back or not go back, but my children are there. And they have to work every day, every single day. It has to be something to disinfect these electronics. And as a parent, if we can help, we are ready to help. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Padilla. Okay, our last speaker for tonight is Danny Reisman.
Good evening, board. My name is Daniel Reisman. I'm here in town, Santa Paula. I'm here representing Santa Paula Little League. Just recently I became a board member on the league as the fundraising supervisor. It's a position that hasn't been held in a while. So when doing so, I was going over the proposed budget or operating costs for our upcoming season. I looked at the current fee schedule for usage of school facilities. On the current fee schedule, it shows just the grass fields at the K-8 sites. I want to say it was $15 an hour. A basic season, all 5 school sites are used, 2 hours a day because we're limited on daylight. Do the math for 3 months, we're looking at $9 grand. Just for a place to practice. We don't ask you guys for anything. We don't ask you for custodians on site. We're not asking you for quality playing surfaces. If you've been on the fields, you know they're full of holes. The backstops haven't been refenced in years, maybe decades. We're not asking for much, just access to the schools that we already pay for. As parents, coaches, volunteers, citizens of this town, we already pay for it. We approved the extra tax measure to put even more money into it. And we're being charged just to simply go and use the fields. It doesn't cost you guys an extra dime. A lot of the other little leagues around the county, they pay very minimal fees, if any. And I'm going to do the same thing for the city council the next meeting. We're getting charged way over the top. I got to come up with, it looks like $17,000 just out of the gate. So we have a place to practice and we have a place to play. And let me remind you, we service the same children that you guys are servicing. Okay, if anybody's complaining about they need to stay a little bit later or they need to clean the restroom at the end of the day or whatever, we're servicing their children and their nieces and their nephews and their cousins. So anybody complaining about kids trying to play youth sports needs to not be employed by our district or anywhere in this town. We're keeping those kids off the street. They're not participating in shootings that are going on in broad daylight because they'd be at practice or they'd be playing a game. And we also remind you that our local sports are suffering tremendously because of this. Soccer as well, AYSO barely got off the ground this year, and part of the problem is fees, a place to practice, places to play, same thing. A lot of kids are going out of town to go play in different districts and different towns. What does that mean? They have to travel. They get home late from practice. They have less time for homework. your CAPS supports are suffering because of that as well. So it all ties together. And I'm just asking you guys to put it on the agenda hopefully soon, possibly deal with this and possibly either dramatically reduce or eliminate the fees that you're charging to our local nonprofit sports programs that are serving the same kids that you guys are serving.
Mr. Rizzo.
Oh, I didn't see it, here it is. Sorry, the last one. Okay.
Hello, I thought I wasn't going to get to speak, but I'm glad I am. My name is Joe Rivas. I'm actually the president of the Band Booster Club. So as first and foremost, yeah, there you go, foremost, I'm a parent, parent of band kids. And one of the things I wanted to do, first of all, up here is I wanted to thank you guys. I wanted to thank the board, Dr. Cora and President Yuris, of that wonderful trailer that we have out there for the kids to use. And we were able to use that this weekend for the first time. We were able to go out there, and you got to see the kids' pride in their faces when we're out there. We have all these trucks following this great giant trailer, right, to our competitions where, of course, Yvonne talked about we got two first places and a second place in percussion, which is really, really amazing when we're traveling out of the district into Palmdale or other places, which we'll be going into Valencia next weekend to represent again. So this is something that we really, really enjoy. We want to say thank you guys personally for following up with us, doing the trailer, and giving these kids something to be really proud of, besides the fact of having a great music program up there. Now, one of the things that we want to talk about, and I know we had a couple of our guys up here talking about certain things, is our growth. And the growth that we're having, I ran into Dr. Cora over at the youth night, and I said, hey, take a look at our band right now, because it had an extra 80 kids in it. And that's our band, 126 plus 80 kids, that's our band in the next year, like coming up in the next year. And the next year and a half, that's where it's at. And you got to look at, because of that great program we're having down at the elementary, where we have 400 to 500 kids down there, 200 at Isabel right now, and we're coming up. Now, with a program this size, you guys have to I just want you to be aware of what's going on, is you have to consider how are they being taught. Now, right now, our ratio is 126 students to 1, Mr. Marquez. Then we had just recently our principal bring on Jerry Cruz as an independent contractor, as an assistant director, but only for a partial of what he usually gets paid through the boosters. Now, all I'm saying is, if you look at sports, you look at every other team that's out there, their ratio is 25 to 1. And we have right now an issue that's just about to go to about 101, 102, 50 to 2. Right now, we really need help on the coaches part of it. We really need help on this. Now, the parents have come up to me many times and they're asking, why do we have to fundraise every 2 weeks to pay for coaches? Why do the parents that pay the taxes, that pay out that, have to take money out of their own pocket to pay for coaches? Something that they believe the district can help us with. So this is just something that we want to throw up for your consideration, guys. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you. Okay, thank you all for your public comments. We are going to take a 5-minute break, and only a 5-minute break before our first presenter comes to the podium. So, everybody come back at 7:25. Take this. resume our meeting. And we're going to start with a presentation on dual language immersion, board presentation. Dr. Cora.
Yes, at this time, I'm going to turn over the microphone to our Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services, Mrs. Chrissy Shefferling, who will make an introduction.
Thank you. I just want to start by sharing with the Board of Trustees that we had an amazing, inspiring day today. Today was our first official dual language immersion stakeholder meeting, and we have the pleasure of having Linda Hartman-Green here, a CABE consultant, to facilitate the meeting. And before she starts, there were over 25 participants at the meeting today. We had parents, community members, teachers, administrators, district administration. It was a really nice cross-section, and was just so impressed by the professionalism, the advocacy for students, and the entire 3 hours, our lens was doing what's best for students. So I'll turn it over to Linda to give a summary of our meeting, and then the purpose of tonight is to provide the Board of Trustees with a DLI training as well. And we talked about before, as we enter in DLI, it takes a whole district commitment. And so Linda actually was in town yesterday and met with Cabinet for about 3 hours to talk about our commitment to creating this successful, sustainable DLI program. Today's stakeholder meeting and this evening, all of you. So thank you, Linda.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam President, board members, superintendent, staff members, and community members. It is my distinct pleasure to be here this evening. I work for the California Association for Bilingual Education, CABE, and I am your professional development consultant. And this is my favorite thing to do is support districts and schools in providing this option for students. And so I will give you a little bit of our timeline to what we will be working on over the next few months, and then give you an overview of dual language immersion. So one of the areas that we want to do is ensure that board members understand the ins and outs of dual language as well. And so we'll look at some of the policies that support our work. We will look at defining the program, the research, and then if you have questions, by all means, please share those with me. So, and I want to applaud the district because, as Ms. Shefferly alluded to, the energy was amazing. The group that came together, you had representation from almost every single stakeholder, and so I applaud you for your efforts in creating that support from all different levels, because that is so important to the strong, successful, and sustainable dual language program. So thank you for that. So I'll start with a little bit of our timeline for planning, what we hope to accomplish this school year. So between now and December, we have quite a few tasks that we want to accomplish. So we met yesterday with the cabinet, and they asked some great questions, and so we are working on making sure they have answers to those questions. We had our first stakeholders meeting where we really got into an overview of what a dual language program is and the research that supports that. And they have a recommendation for the board on one of the elements. And then we will be planning for staffing and hiring, what needs to be in place to assure that we are able to hire the staff and staff the program. Looking at how to advertise and market the program, and working on, between now and December, bringing a draft master plan for you of the dual language program. Working on creating a parent survey and setting some dates for parent meetings. So all of that will happen between now and the end of this year. And then between January and July, we plan to distribute and analyze the parent survey and use that information to support and inform the informational meetings. We so far have 2 and the potential for 3 informational meetings, both held in the morning and the evening, to support educating parents on this option. We will continue holding regular meetings with the stakeholder group and continue to provide regular updates to the board as well, and looking at hiring a teacher or teachers depending on what grade level or grade levels we decide to roll out the program, and then providing professional development for the teachers once identified. So this is what we will be working on over the next few months. And again, we'll keep you informed as we go. And so one of the things we wanted to provide you with kind of the political backdrop for dual language programs right now. So in my 20 plus years as an educator, I've been working with dual language programs, and I don't think there's a better time to start a dual language program than right now, because there are quite a few policies in place that support the work that we are embarking on. So the first one I'll talk about is the State Board of Education's English Learner Policy and how that supports dual language. So the State Board of Education in 2017 adopted the EL roadmap. So this is California's vision on how they want to support English language learners in the state of California to be successful. So academically successful, ready for career and college readiness. And if you read the last couple of lines, it says opportunities to develop proficiency in multiple languages, okay? So our roadmap on how to best support English language learners includes having them become minimally bilingual and biliterate, okay? And so this is one of the pathways that the roadmap calls out to reach that goal, okay? We also look at, we look at California's mission, and so there are some key words that show a shift in how the state of California is viewing students who come to our schools with a language other than English. And so we've shifted from a deficit model, seeing it as something other than a strength, quite frankly. And so the words where we're looking at affirming and welcoming and responding and actually stating English learners' strengths. This is a new, this is a big shift in our state when we are describing English language learners and linguistic, global, diverse, and multilingual world. And so these are very strong, purposeful words, and the program that we are developing will align and support this English learner roadmap. Additional policy that supports our work, in 2018, the former state superintendent of public schools created a Global California 2030 initiative. And this was in direct response to the California voters on Proposition 58, where they overwhelmingly supported students learning a second and third language in elementary and high schools in our California schools. And so what the state superintendent did at the time was create this pathway to prepare students for Global California 2030 and beyond. So he set some pretty high benchmarks for us to meet, and the current state superintendent is supporting this initiative. And so you will see a lot of work at the state level supporting this. And so one of the goals within this Global California 2030 is seeing a significant increase in the number of students being awarded the State Seal of Biliteracy. And so the district currently offers the State Seal of Biliteracy. The dual language program would increase significantly the number of students eligible for that. It would take time for them to get there, but they would get there. And so 2017, there were approximately 47,000 students in the state receiving the award, and by 2030, they want to see that increase up to close to 200,000. Okay, and so this is, you will see high schools doing a lot of work around this. And so you have a strong world language program, and this will also be another pathway for students. We also, within the initiative, is an increase in the number of dual language or dual immersion schools. So and in 2017, there were about 407, and so we're looking for, by the end of next school year, hopefully closer to 800, and then by 2030, 1,600. So a significant increase in that. And this also requires the state to support teachers acquiring the skills necessary to be able to teach in these classrooms, because we know that as a result of Proposition 227, we have a shortage of bilingual teachers, right? Because we didn't provide them with that foundation. So the state is working to support that, and there is a lot of focus on that right now. So that is also, I think, supports the efforts that the district is moving towards. In addition to that, our ELA/ELD framework in Chapter 2 actually cites that bilingual programs in which biliteracy is the goal, which is a dual language program, actually supports students' progress in their primary language as well as English. So students who read in their primary language actually do better in English. And so again, all of these provide the political backdrop and policy backdrop to support the work of our committee. So give you a little bit of background on definition and overview, and we'll get into some of the data that shows the results. So I'm going to go back to the triangle. CABE is very committed to providing professional development and support so that the programs that are implemented are strong, successful, and sustainable. So we want these programs to help students over the long term really reap the benefits of bilingualism and biliteracy. And we know that it takes time, it takes support, and it takes getting all the right pieces in place. And so we are making sure that we are laying a very solid foundation so that the program will be sustainable over time. And so the California Department of Education defines a dual language immersion program as a program that where the target language, so this is any language other than English, and so for our program it would be Spanish. So Spanish is used for a minimum of 50% of the time, so 50% of their instructional day. And English used for a minimum of 10%. Okay, and then for a dual language immersion, or oftentimes called a two-way immersion, you would want to have at least 33% native speakers of English and primary speakers of Spanish. So you would want to have a mix of language backgrounds, right? So I sometimes refer to them as English experts and Spanish experts, so that they're helping each other learn each other's language and culture. And the students who are bilingual, those kids get to help negotiate meaning and support both groups. So they see the power of bilingualism very early on. So other dual language programs, so other programs that are considered dual language but are not necessarily called a dual language immersion or a two-way immersion, are what we call developmental bilingual education. And really when you're talking about program types, it has to do with the students that you serve. Okay, so the dual language immersion has both groups of students, Spanish speakers and English speakers together. A developmental bilingual education program is primarily for English language learners to maintain and fully develop their primary language while they're adding on English. And then a one-way dual immersion would be English dominant students who are learning another language. Sometimes it's the language of their heritage, so maybe their parents speak the language or their grandparents, and other times they may not be connected to the language at all, but they want to learn a second language. Our parents would like them to be bilingual and biliterate. So those three types of programs are what we consider dual language programs because they have as their outcome bilingualism and biliteracy, academic competence in both languages, and sociocultural competence. And they are what we consider additive bilingual programs. And by that, I mean whatever the child's native language is, we are building upon that and adding a second language. Okay, so we don't have to lose one language to acquire the second language, which on the right side of the umbrella are what we call subtractive bilingual programs. So these are programs that replace the primary language with English. And so those would be a transitional bilingual program where students maybe receive support in their primary language for a couple of years and then transition out of the Spanish language into English. And so the goal is English academic achievement versus bilingualism and biliteracy. Okay, so when you look at research, additive bilingual programs are the only bilingual programs that close the achievement gap for English language learners and their English proficient counterparts. Okay. So that was a big part of our discussion today, and one of the big takeaways that our group had was that this program is designed to close the achievement gap between our English dominant students and our English language learners. And so that is a very, we talk about what is best for kids, that is right up there. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about program models. There are 2 program models that are most researched. The first one is the 90-10, and important to understand that when you're talking about a dual language model, the numbers refer to how the program starts, not necessarily how it ends. So within a 90-10 model, if you look at the different colors, blue represents the amount of instructional time in Spanish, and yellow the amount of instructional time in English. And so you see in the beginning kindergarten grade level, for example, 90% of the instructional day would be in Spanish, 10% would be in English. And then over time, or each subsequent year, the amount of instruction in English increases by 10%, and the amount of instruction in Spanish would decrease by 10% until the end of elementary, where it is then 50% in Spanish and 50% in English. And this model, when we look at second language acquisition research and how both groups of students, both our English proficient and our Spanish proficient, how they acquire a second language in this country for our native Spanish speakers, we want to create a really solid foundation in their primary language and add the English to it. And so this model does that for our students. Now for our native English speakers, they need an immersion experience where they are in a situation where they have to use the language to meet their needs. And so the model also creates an immersion experience for those students. So there are different pathways for the students to arrive at bilingualism and biliteracy, and the 90-10 model supports both groups of students in meeting that need. So with the 90-10 model, it's what we call a sequential literacy model, because all of the students are learning to read and write first in Spanish. Okay, so from kindergarten to second grade, they're doing mathematics entirely in Spanish, reading and writing, all of their homework, all of those primary literacy skills are being taught in English, and then during their English time, they're receiving literacy-based ELD. Okay, so they are working on they're learning how to read, so we're not worried about them falling behind in reading, because once you learn to read in Spanish, they'll transfer it over to English. And we're working on, for our English learners, oral language proficiency and academic English for both our English dominant and our Spanish dominant students. And then when they hit third grade is when we formally add the reading and writing component in English. And so from that point forward, they are working on biliteracy formally. Okay. So that's the 90-10 model. And the second model that has been researched is the 50-50 model. And so this is what we call simultaneous literacy, because from the beginning, half of their coursework is in Spanish and half of their coursework is in English, and they are learning to read both in English and Spanish simultaneously. So from kindergarten, they're learning to read in both languages at the same time. Okay, so that's a little simpler to explain. We talked a lot about the benefits. Parents brought up a lot of the benefits to the 90-10, and they felt they could be more involved. They felt that they could support homework. They felt they could support their students. They could support the teachers in the classroom, outside of the classroom. They just felt that this really offered a space for them to be even more involved in the education of their children and supporting the district's mission and vision.
That was the parents today at the meeting?
The parents today at the meeting, yes.
Did you have any English-only parents?
That is
okay. Okay, just to get that perspective
Yes,
as well.
yes, thank you. And so the program at the secondary level secondary, middle and high schools are generally continuation programs of an elementary program. And what the requirements are to be considered dual language at the middle and high school are 2 to 3 classes in the target language or in Spanish per semester. So typically that is a Spanish language arts class, moving up to AP Spanish language and literature, and potentially a third language or some type of career readiness pathway using the target language, and then another course. So a lot of times it is history and social science. Sometimes people get creative and do theater in Spanish, and so that's something that we're going to have discussions about and discover and dialogue about during our creation of the dual language master plan. So the outcomes for the two programs, both models are well researched and both have extremely successful outcomes. And so when you look at the differences between the 90-10 model and the 50-50 model, both of them achieve high levels of literacy in both Spanish and English. However, you'll notice with the 90-10, it says they achieve higher levels of literacy in the two languages. Both of them over time show that the students begin to outperform their peers who are in English-only programs. Okay? And then both close the achievement gap, and we see that the 90-10 closes the achievement gap faster. And then the 90-10 also achieves higher levels of oral language and literacy in the target language. Okay? So when we looked at these outcomes and we had discussions about which model did this committee feel most comfortable recommending to the board for consideration, based on the research, the 90-10 model would be the model that ultimately the group would recommend to the board. So that was one of our first decisions that we made. We were very excited to be able to make a recommendation or decision today. So, and it was, I believe, unanimous. I think everyone said, based on the research, they could support that recommendation. So we'll talk about research. There's over many years of research. I'm going to share with you one of the most famous studies, the Collier-Thomas study, and it is a very large-scale longitudinal study, over 32 plus years of research, and they have replicated their results, so it is a valid, reliable piece of research. And so they looked at English learners' long-term achievement by program model. And so if you look on the right-hand side of the graph, it details different types of programs that students participate in. So the very top, I think it's a dark blue, is a two-way dual program. So you have students who are primary language is Spanish and primary language is English together. The hot pink bar is a one-way dual, that's just having the one language group. And then the yellow and the turquoise, those are transitional bilingual programs, one of them a late exit and one of them an early exit. So they are receiving some primary language instruction, but the ultimate goal is not bilingualism and biliteracy. It really is to transition over to English. And then the bottom two colors are when students are placed in English-only settings and they receive ELD or English language development support. So the top one is content ELD, where they're receiving English language development support through their content areas, maybe social studies, science. And then the bottom one is a pull-out ESL, where they're pulled out of the classroom for a period of time. On the bottom, we see the different grade levels. So from first grade all the way through 11th grade. And then the left-hand side are the NCEs. And then there's a blue dashed line that shows that would be what a typical English only child, how they would perform on a standardized test in English. So they would be at the 50th NCE. So it's like the 50th percentile. So kind of thinking of a bell curve. And so if we look at how the students do over time, well, when they start the program in third grade, and this is important for a board to understand, because when you get that first round of CASP scores and you're all excited because this is their third grade and their first year of English, you aren't necessarily going to see them at grade level, but you're going to see, you can see from this the graph clearly that the students, depending on their program, they're on different trajectories. okay? We're starting to see differences in how they're performing based on the program that they are in, okay? And so our two-way and our one-way students are definitely at the top of that trajectory. When we fast forward to 7th grade, and this would align to second language acquisition research that clearly states and shows that it takes 5 to 7 years to fully learn a second language, not just the social language, but really that academic language. We start to see the students in the dual language programs meet grade level expectations and actually exceed them in the case for the two-way. We see the late exit and the early exit kind of flatlining and starting to take a downward tilt, and then the content ELD also kind of flatlining and the pullout starting to take a dip down. Then when we look at the students, if they continue in this type of program through high school, we clearly see that the two-way dual students and the one-way dual students outperform their English-only peers. Okay, so they're reading and writing at grade level in English and in Spanish. Okay, and then we see the other programs how they perform. And this is a piece on academic achievement. Dr. Lindholm Leary does quite a bit of research on student attitudes and identities, and there's a lot of work around there that has very positive outcomes for students in dual language programs as well. They're more likely to feel confident about their performance in school. They're more likely to feel that even when something is hard, they will work through it. They are more likely to maintain intergenerational relationships because they can actually communicate with their parents and their grandparents in their primary language. So there's a lot of research that also supports the social emotional development of the children as well. Collier and Thomas also looked at, I'm going to skip the one on English learners because I feel like the graph does a really good job of that one, but they also looked at do different student groups benefit, or does everyone benefit from a dual language program, or is it just for specific students? And so when they break down how white students perform in a dual language program, I'll explain to you the colors. On the left-hand side, we see a graph for a standardized reading test in English, and on the right-hand side, a standardized math test in English. And so the colors are, in the red bar graphs represent students in dual language programs at a school. School has a dual language program, and the student actually participates in the dual language program. Now the green is the school has a dual language program, however the student is not enrolled in the dual language program, they're in the English strand. And then the blue bar is a student that's not, there's no program at their school, and they're not enrolled in a dual language program. And so you can see 3rd grade and beyond, each year the students are outperforming their peers. Okay, and you see that trend. First of all, you see an upward trend, which is always positive, right? But you see them outperform both in reading and in math over time. When we look at African American students, we see the same trend. They are outperforming their peers, both in reading and math. Okay. When we look at students from low socioeconomic status, the colors are different. So green means that they are not in a dual language program, and red means that they are in a dual language program. And we see the same trend, that the students in the dual language program, when we compare them to students not, students from low socioeconomic backgrounds who are not in dual language programs, the students in the programs outperform their peers both in English and in math. And we also, they also looked at students who participate in special education, so exceptional students, and the trend is also the same, that they perform equal or better to their peers who are in English only, both in reading and math. And so we talked a lot about this because the dual language program is inclusive. It does not exclude students just because they learn differently. So that was the data that we have, and if you're interested, the Red Book has lots of resources on that. So these are some of the benefits on bilingualism. Students become greater problem-solving skills, increased meta-linguistic awareness. They appreciate and understand multicultural and develop multicultural competencies. They're able to understand people who are different from them and more accepting. They are truly ready for a multilingual world. So we're laying a foundation for them to be successful in a very global society. We will ground our work in research and evidence-based practices. So the guiding principles for dual language education, 3rd edition, has research that is based on effective schools research through the dual language lens. So it brings together really the best of those both worlds. And so we will be looking at the different strands within the guiding principles to guide our implementation. So it is research-based. And then these are the goals, the 3 pillars, the bilingualism and biliteracy, high academic achievement in 2 languages, and sociocultural competence. And these will be the goals of the program. And we will develop along the way ways to celebrate the family's commitment to dual language. And so the state has the seal of biliteracy, but there are also what we call pathways to biliteracy. So schools with dual language programs and even without dual language programs can offer different types of awards. And sometimes it's a ribbon, sometimes it's a certificate, a medal, etc. at different points in this journey to becoming fully bilingual and biliterate. And showing that they're on that pathway to receive the seal of biliteracy. So typically that happens in the kindergarten time frame, 3rd grade, 6th grade, so end of elementary, and then end of middle school to really highlight their accomplishments and celebrate all of their efforts. And so I wanted to personally thank those that are in the dual language district leadership team. So if you're here, I see a couple of you want to stand. And thank you for being there today. Go ahead, Alicia. Yes, so thank you very much. It was truly my pleasure to be with such a passionate team, and I appreciate. I am really looking forward to continuing to work with this group of individuals and lay really lay a solid foundation for your program. And so, thank you for your time. Are there any questions at this point? Thank you very much.
Just a minute.
Yes, sir.
I don't know whether I have questions. It's just that I'm extremely proud of this board for passing this program. I think that it restores local control at its purest form. You didn't mention this, but there's a lot of parent input annually as well. So you track your own progress as to the successfulness, the success of the program.
Yes.
And you can't argue with the research.
No.
It's all positive, and regardless of your political party, you have to thank Governors Brown, Newsom, Tony Thurman, and Torrickson for having the vision for this program, and Proposition 58, which passed with 73.5% of the vote. I have to tell you my own personal story. There's 2 reasons that I support this program. I went to Europe a couple of years ago, and everybody was multilingual except the Americans. So we're far behind in that arena. And the second thing was, as a delegate, I had to validate the Golden Bell program, the dual immersion program at Oxnard Elementary. And I saw with my own 2 eyes how it worked.
Yes.
And but they were really smart because they were getting validated. They brought in students, not only English learners, but English speakers who spoke fluent Spanish during the entire meeting. I think they thought I knew more Spanish. But it works. You see, and they help their parents at the grocery store. I mean, it's just really phenomenal.
Yes.
So I'm very, very happy that that we're able to bring this program to our district, and with Kaveh's help, I'm sure we'll never be successful.
Thank you. Yes, I look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Information items. Public hearing regarding composition of the trustee areas. Dr. Cora.
Yes, thank you, President Ubias. Larry Fairchild from Cooperative Strategies is here Before any member of the public speaks, he's going to give a very quick, give the public a very quick background information regarding the trustee maps and voting process. So there's information there to speak on that, and the items 9B and 9C. Mr. Bertrand, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Porter, members of the board. Very first, talking about cooperative strategies, brief as we go through this presentation. Kind of took the summer off from the process, so a little refresher on where we've been. We started the process back in March with the first pre-map public hearing, second one in April. Sunshine these proposals back in June. Held 2 community input meetings in August, and there's a mistake on here. The second community meeting on the 28th was actually at Barbara Webster at 6 p.m. not the city school, so sorry about that typo. Tonight we have a couple of items on the agenda for this process as we move forward. The maps have been on the district's website, available for public review. We had the community input meetings, and tonight we have the first of at least two public hearings on the maps. So that'll happen right after I'm done blabbering on for a few minutes. And then later on in the agenda, you'll have a public hearing on the waiver request. And what the waiver is when a school district goes to change its method of election from at-large to by area, under the law, that typically triggers an election just on the question of whether you can change your election method. Recognizing you're doing this to get ahead, not be subject to potential litigation, you can seek a waiver from the State Board of Education, like you do for other types of requirements under the Education Code. So you can seek a waiver from the State Board of Education so that you don't have to go through the process of an election on just whether to change your method of election. So it saves time, it saves money, it provides certainty through this process. So that's a routine matter that the State Board hears every other month when they meet, and they approve them regularly on their consent agenda. So 99.9% of districts that have gone through this process have sought for and received the waiver. So you'll hold a public hearing on that waiver request and a couple of items down, and then following that, you'll have an item to consider approving the submission of that waiver request, which would then go to the State Board and probably be heard at their January meeting at this point. They have a 60-day window prior to their meetings in order for an item to make their way to the agenda. So that's all before you tonight. After we've received any public comments, board discussion on the scenarios tonight, any feedback, any narrowing down of the options from the two that we have will certainly happen. We'll hold another public hearing on the 13th of November, at which point the board could then select which map it wanted to move forward with, approve the resolution to transition officially from at-large to by-area method of election, and send that on to the County Committee on School District Organization, the Ventura County office. They will then hold a public hearing sometime in November, December, depending on when they can schedule the meeting and get quorum of their membership. They'll hold a public hearing here in the district to hear any feedback from the community, hear from us on the district's process, and then consider approving your request to change your election method. So by January, you should have all your approvals in place from the county and the state to submit the information to the county registrar of voters so that everything's in place for the November 2020 election. So that's kind of where we are timeline-wise. Refresher on this, the considerations that go into drawing the trustee area is roughly equal in terms of total population, drawn to comply with the Federal Voting Rights Act, compact, contiguous, looking at keeping communities of interest together, looking at using natural or man-made geographic features. We want logical boundary lines that are understandable to folks. Incumbency and allowable consideration, not necessarily primary consideration, and then other local considerations might be schools, school attendance boundaries, anything else that the board might want to put on. Overview of the district demographics we're using as required the 2010 census data, which is 9.5 years old at this point. But that is the most recent count of actual residents within the school district, and we have to do that based on total residents. So of the 31,924 people who were counted in 2010, dividing that into 5 roughly equal areas of 6,000 plus people. You can see the population breakdown in terms of different ethnicities on total population and population 18 and over. I'll pause here to say that we're talking about the 2010 census. We're going to have a new census in about 6 months that's going to be done. That data will come out in about 18 months. So in about April of 2021, we'll have new data. The district will have to look at the areas that it approves, see if the populations are in balance or out of balance based on the 10% requirement between the largest and smallest areas, and make any adjustments in time for the 2022 election. So it's a shorter process than what you're going through right now to initially establish trustee areas, but you will have to revisit this process in 2021. Just some additional data here on citizen voting age population. You can see here the Latino population is 66%, is the largest by far group and the largest protected class within the district. You'll see that in the two scenarios, all 5 areas maintain a majority Latino citizen voting age population. So we're in compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act there. The map on the right just shows different areas of concentration of the Latino citizen voting age population. So we have the 2 scenarios that we've provided for community input and feedback. And so this is scenario 1. 2 maps. The second one just shows the elementary school district boundary overlays, so you can see the feeder districts line on top of this. But in both scenarios, area 1 is yellow, area 2 is green, 3 is that reddish one in the middle, 4 is blue, and 5 is purple. We have put all the school sites on here. We've got current trustees' residents on there, so you can see that information. On the district's website, there's larger versions of these maps available, so you can zoom in a little bit better and see the streets that are the dividing lines there. But you can see area 1 is kind of in the north and eastern side of the district. Area 2 coming closer into town there on the north side and west. Area 3 right in the center. Area 4 but on the western side, but it's still coming into the center of town, right about where we're at. And then area 5 being south of the 126, but extending north to grab the population. Again, to have roughly equal populations, you're going to see areas that are geographically larger and smaller, but equal in terms of total population. This map then just puts the elementary feeder district boundaries on top, so you can see that information. And then with each scenario, we have lots of numbers to share. But the highlight here is that number 1, we're within population variance. So our total population variance is about 8% on this scenario, so that's within our 10% limit. And then we also have all 5 areas, as you can see, where the Hispanic Latino population is the majority. Smallest is in area 2, where it's just at 56%, but all the others are in the 70% range. And you can see the different ethnic groups on both total population and citizen voting age population. Scenario 2, it's a little bit different. I think we have here 3 rather compact areas in the center of the district, and then an area in the north and an area in the south that are a little bit larger and more spread out. Might be a little bit different. I think in scenario 1, we have 1 really compact area and 3 kind of more spread out areas. Positive or negative on either of those, but just kind of an observation in terms of what they look like. You see area 5 kind of is that giant area in the northern part of the district, coming down and taking in both sides of town on the outskirts. Area 3 being the southern area coming in right around Isabel Middle School to get the population center there to get the numbers to get to that 6,000 resident population. And then you can see areas 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, and 4, kind of in the center of town as you go from west to east through the district. Then again, the elementary school district overlays, as well as the demographic information again within the 10% threshold. Still creating 5 areas of majority Latino citizen voting age population. 1 area, 91%, area 4 in that center of town. So in compliance there with that, it's really just a matter of getting some public feedback if there is any, as well as more discussion at this point on concerns, questions, comments on those. So let you open it up to the public and then jump back up when the board has any questions.
So President Reese, if you're ready, we can open up the public hearing and we'll move down the items.
So we will open up this public hearing at 8:10 p.m. regarding composition of the trustee areas. And the purpose of the hearing is to receive public comment and input on the draft maps that are under consideration for approval by the district to use beginning in 2020 in a by trustee area election process. Are there any comments from the audience? Do any board members wish to be heard on this matter?
Can I get some more clarification on the request for a waiver? I heard you say something about, so it doesn't have to go to the public wanting to change, or going back to the public to have a special election or something like that to change the boundaries, whether or not we go to districts or keep it as it is. Can you re-explain that little process again?
Sure. So under the education code, anytime a district changes its method of election, in this case from at-large to by area, the law has a component that triggers an election on that question of whether the district can switch its election method. Now, that was written well in advance of the California Voting Rights Act, which is what the district is being responsive to here. The potential for a demand letter or a lawsuit challenging the method of election. So what districts do is they seek a waiver from that election requirement so that they can expedite this process, move forward in a way that avoids any potential litigation. If the election were to fail, for example, that would be evidence that somebody can use that in violation of the California Voting Rights Act. It saves money because if there's an election on the ballot, that's going to cost the district out of the general fund. It saves time, it just gets this process rolling forward a little bit quicker and provides certainty through the process. So as I said, almost every district, I can't think of one that I've worked with that hasn't applied for the waiver, and I only know of one anecdotally that didn't through this process. But it doesn't take away the public's right to vote on board members or in future elections. It's only on the question of changing your method of election.
Thank you.
Christine? Is there any way to know, because I wasn't in attendance at the other public meetings, what their comments were from the public? Were there any? What was it about? What are the concerns, if any?
I think a lot of the questions have to deal with some of the slides. Joe, can you go back a couple of, go back, yeah, that's one, yeah. A lot of the questions I thought were based on how did these numbers come to be and where did they come from? And if you go back one more, how were those two maps drawn? Those were the primary questions that I remember. And Ms. Colbeck was at the last meeting that we had. I'm not sure if she'd like to share as well, but those are some of the comments I remember. Ms. Colbeck, do you remember anything besides that?
I think there's just total confusion by the public and by us, so when it finally happens, I guess we'll figure it out.
Was there any preference for one map over the other map, or?
No, not really, because no one really understands. I mean, when I talk to some parents, they don't understand why some are smaller and some are bigger, but then I try to explain that it's based on sheer numbers, so who votes here and who doesn't, so that's part of the confusion.
So Mr. Birchall, along those lines of what was just said, is there an easier way, or what's the easiest way in your opinion to be able to describe, looking at those maps, why are some areas smaller, why are some so big? To be important for the board to be able to answer that if somebody asks them from the public.
Yeah, I think that the explanation that it is based on number of people in each area that have to be roughly equal. So we're looking for about 6,000 people in each area. And just driving around, there's some areas of the city that are really densely populated, and it doesn't take very far to get 6,000 people. And if you keep driving out farther and farther, you're going to find areas that are sparsely populated, and that's why we have, scenario 2, that purple area, we have to drive a long way to get 6,000 people into that particular voting district. So it really is based on people. So regardless of how unequal they look in terms of land mass, they are roughly equal in terms of population.
One of the other questions that I remember being asked is, what happens if no one runs for a position in one of those 5 areas?
Sure, so that would be treated as a vacancy on the board, and that board would then have the ability to appoint somebody to that seat. That person would have to come from that area still. But there sometimes is a lower threshold for somebody to put in a paperwork to be appointed to a spot rather than having to run for a particular seat. I'm not aware yet of a district that I work with that hasn't been able to field candidates, keeping in mind that now that these are smaller areas to run from, the barriers to entry in terms of cost of candidate statements, cost of lawn signs, all that good stuff comes down as well. So it can be a little easier for folks to run in these areas.
I would like to suggest that option number 2, to me, I'm not an analyst, but it appears to me that option 2 is preferable to option 1, only because it preserves it keeps the east side of Santa Paula together more than option 1. A huge percentage of Latinos live on the east side of town, and I think that if you go with number 1, it divides them more on the east side, whereas number 2, it's more inclusive of that whole east area east area. You see what I mean? It's larger the east part is larger in option 2 than it is in option 1. It goes further by a few streets. It goes further east. It includes Citrus, 14th, Giverson, Garcia. Whereas the first one kind of cuts it off a little bit, cuts off a few streets, and really that's all one area. In my opinion, it should all be together.
And I think you see that as numbers where you see Area 4 and Scenario 2 at about 90% Latino citizen voting age population, which is 20 percentage points higher than in the other scenarios in terms of the highest Latino citizen voting age population area. So I think that's good feedback to hear that the way that Area 4 is created in this scenario is more reflective of that neighborhood.
Yeah, I think it's very homogeneous, is that how you say it really kept in my opinion. It's not even my area, but that's my opinion for that area.
That's good feedback.
Joe, can you go back to number 1 real quick? Yeah. Can't be side by side, right? It's 1 and 2 side by side. Probably not.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do some.
That doesn't matter.
The next meeting we can put into the PowerPoint maybe a side by side of the two, so you can kind of see them.
Okay, so no, we just had our discussion. So if there's no further discussion, we will close the public hearing at 8:20 p.m. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Furchon.
Okay, information item 8B, California School Dashboard Local Indicators.
Again, I'm going to turn it over at this time to our Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services, Ms. Kristen Sheffield.
Thank you. Good evening. Tonight we're going to review our district's progress on the California Dashboard Local Indicators. Reporting out on the local indicators is a newer component of California's accountability system, which now requires on an annual basis that each district in the state of California report out on progress on these indicators. I'll start with a review of the priority areas for LCFF. On the left-hand side, first column, you'll see the 8 priorities of the local control funding formula. We're most familiar with the middle column state indicators in green, the academic indicator, chronic absenteeism indicator. These are the indicators that you'll see on the California dashboard that are most detail outlined in most detail and reflected in the colors. But tonight we're going to focus in on the far right-hand side, local indicators. We're going to be looking at our progress on basic conditions at our schools, implementation of the state academic standards, parent engagement, local climate, as well as access to a broad course of study. Why local indicators? As mentioned earlier, it reflects the state shift to local control, get input from feedback from stakeholders, and design supports for districts based on local needs. These priorities are more oriented towards an implementation measure versus a summative outcome. So you're not going to see hard percentages like you do with the California dashboard color indicators. And most importantly, the third bullet, it's important for our local community to understand the holistic picture of our district, that there's an academic focus, but also a parent involvement, a climate focus, and a implementation of our state standards. So again, we're going to be looking at 5 indicators. In order to receive a rating of MET, a district has to do a couple of things. Number 1, we have to reflect on the indicators, report out on the progress of these indicators at a regularly scheduled board meeting. And the second requirement is we have to post our progress onto the California dashboard website by November 1st. So tonight is our information on progress. So we'll start with priority 1, looking at appropriately assigned teachers, access to curriculum and instructional materials in safe, clean, and functional school facilities. Currently, we have 0 missed assignments. At our last board meeting, we declared sufficiency. All of our students have textbooks. And the third is we take a look at the Williams facilities visits, and our schools all had a rating of good on that fit assessment. Priority 2, we're looking at basic services again, in terms of do pupils in our district have not only materials, but materials that are aligned to our newer California state standards. In the past 5 years, in English language arts, ELD, and mathematics, TK through 12, we are fully aligned to the Common Core state standards. We have also adopted material in world language, as well as 6th through 12th grade history, social science. This spring, we will be researching and exploring TK through 5 history, social studies materials. They actually aren't even publishing ours anymore because of the new standards and the new framework, as well as we will research new textbooks for our 9th grade health course, which I think our book was published, I believe, in 04, so it's time. We'll continue to utilize our transition materials in science. We need some more learning in the next generation science standards, as well as the shift to inquiry-based teaching, and then in the subsequent year, look at a pilot and an adoption. So we are well on our way. We are not finished adopting standards aligned materials. So later this year, we'll need to come to the board requesting a resolution to continue to commit funds towards purchasing standards aligned textbooks. Our kids, our teachers need the tools in order to improve student achievement. We also, last spring, surveyed our teaching staff and to get their perception, their opinion on what is our progress in implementing the state standards. And on this graph, you'll see that we are moving from initial implementation on our way to full implementation on the far left-hand side, English language arts, English language development, mathematics, and then towards the right-hand side, physical education. Our teachers are doing an amazing job. It was the perfect storm. New accountability system, new frameworks, new standards, new textbooks. And so we're taking incremental steps, and as we adopt, providing professional development. And we'll continue to give this survey again spring of 2020. Priority 3 speaks to parent engagement. We continue to seek input from our stakeholders and parents included in terms of how we're building relationships with parents, how we're seeking input from our parents, and how we're promoting parent participation in district programs. On the left-hand side, you'll see the many committees, site and district, that we provide opportunities for our parents to become involved. On the left-hand side. On the right-hand side are the parent involvement opportunities that we continue to provide. Title I Family Conference, Latino Literacy Project, Migrant Program. Many of our parents, the padres, that come to our board meetings, providing for the first time the leadership training, and as well as Ms. Coco Aguirre in the past, who has provided kindergarten through second grade parent and child workshops. So we are in the initial stage. We're moving towards full implementation. Full implementation will be when we have these systems set across the entire district. The highest level is full implementation with sustainability. That means that they're embedded in part of the culture in our district. For the first time last year, we administered an LCAP survey. Very proud, we had 791 respondents. And like I shared, state and federal projects, Mrs. Ramirez and staff hand tallied all of those. So we are working on a paper survey which could be scanned this year. And you can see the remainder of the bullets and how many respondents that we had. So we were well represented by a variety of stakeholders, and we'll continue to administer an LCAP survey. Again, this slide just lists the parent opportunities, 17, 18, and 18, 19. The bottom row with an approximate number of participants. Will continue to track how many parents are involved in each of our workshops. Priority 6 speaks to, does a district administer a local climate survey? Santa Paula Unified does. We administer the California Healthy Kids Survey every other year. The data you see here was from spring of 2018. We will administer the California Healthy Kids Survey this upcoming spring. The graph you see on the table on the left-hand side speaks to school connectedness. Questions in this category, for example, sound like, is there at least one adult on campus that you can go to and trust? The percentages reflect strongly agree, only. So you can see that we have some work to do in the social-emotional connectedness in building a positive, healthy climate in our schools. This is the type of information that the Board of Trustees, that the LCAP Advisory Committee needs to take into consideration as we continue to identify and prioritize our actions and services. On the right-hand side is their perception of how safe they feel while they're at school. Again, this was administered spring 2018. We'll administer it again this upcoming spring. Bottom left-hand corner, you will see the number of students who participated in the California Healthy Kids Survey. So it's important that we continue to administer this. Priority 7 speaks to access to a broad course of study. Do all of our kids have access to the core curriculum, as well as enrichment opportunities, the music program? And across our schools, our kids do have access. We don't preclude any student from participating, and we've implemented measures to continue to increase that access. For example, in the middle column, second paragraph, we've added an additional period to the master schedule at Isabel Middle School, a 0-period PE, which now allows English learners and even special education students who have to take these specialized classes within the school day that historically has replaced their elective. It allows them to take PE before school. It opens up their schedule to take the wonderful electives that we have. In grades 9 through 12, we are one of the few high schools across the county that submitted our ELD Level 3 class for UCA through G submission, and that was approved last year, which means that our English learners who are in that transition Level 3 class get UCA through G credit for 1 year in the category of English by taking an ELD class. So our staff worked real hard to, again, increase access and raise expectations for kids, as well as the third paragraph in the last column. We have additional periods outside of the school day added for electives. For example, our 7th period robotics and our 7th period stagecraft course with Jerry Cruz. And again, how do we monitor whether or not our students have this access at the, should say TK through 5 level? So, all schools turn in their English language development block times. We ensure that our English learners have that instruction. They turn in their PE times to us to make sure that all students receive that 200 minutes. They also turn in their daily schedules to their principals to make sure that we're teaching all of the subject areas, library schedules, music schedules. So all of those schedules are collected and looked at by our site and district administration to ensure that we're not scheduling things where kids don't have access as best as possible. We look at the master schedule and our QSIS reports for the middle school and high school. We've brought on TES, a transcript evaluation service, where we look at the transcripts of every single one of our high school students, and EAOP helps us with that to determine how can we increase A through G and look at all of our groups of students to make sure that they have access to courses. And as we review that data, we have to write to, are there any revisions, decisions, or new actions that we'll implement? And so the 3 bullets state that we will continue to offer these before and after school electives in order to support students with impacted schedules, or students who might need to take a reading intervention class at the middle school. They go to 0-period PE, now they can take that robotics course and still get the intervention classes that they need. We'll continue to examine those daily schedules at the elementary school, ensuring that when we pull out for reading intervention, we're not pulling out during core, that we're pulling out during that universal access differentiated time. Because we don't want kids to miss science, social studies, math, or English to receive intervention. So our principals do a really, really good job at looking at their master schedule and scheduling that service as best as they can outside of the core. The third bullet is what we're focusing on this year, is we're strengthening our data collection and analysis of students participating in career tech education. What we have found in both of our academies and some of our pathways is that we have few to none English learners or special education students participating in these wonderful programs. And we're now pulling data, we're now recruiting all students. So bullet 3 will be an area of emphasis, not only this year, but in the coming years. We need to make some shifts to ensure that particularly career tech education is inclusive and there's equity in all kids to be able to participate in these opportunities, and we're not there yet. So that is our obligation, our responsibility as a school district to report out on local indicators. Our next step is we take the data and we enter it in the California Dashboard portal before November 1st. And when the dashboard comes out, late November, early December, the Board of Trustees will see met on all local indicators.
Does the board have any questions for Ms. Shefferly? Thank you, Ms. Shefferly.
Another wonderful job from Ms. Shefferly. Action item 9A, donations. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? This board would like to thank everybody who donates, all the groups and individuals. Thank you very much. 9B, public hearing regarding intent to request a waiver. The Santa Paula Unified School District will consider seeking a waiver from the State Board of Education of the requirement that the establishment of trustee areas and adoption of a by trustee area election process be submitted to the electors as set forth in Education Code 5019 and 5020. I will open this public hearing at 8:35 p.m. Any comments? Seeing none, I will close this hearing at 8:35 p.m. Approval of resolution 2019-20:04. Do I have approval? A motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. 9D, public hearing disclosure of proposed collective bargaining agreement. The Board of Trustees of the Santa Paula Unified School District will hold a hearing and consider input from the public on the proposed agreement between the California School Employees Association Local Chapter 891 and the Santa Paula Unified School District dated July 1, 2019 through June 30th, 2022. I will open this public hearing at 8:36 p.m. Do we have any input? Welcome to the board. Okay. I'll close the public hearing at 8:37 p.m. 9E, approval of collective bargaining agreement between Santa Paula Unified School District and the California School Employees Association, Local Chapter 891. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. 9F, approval of memorandum of understanding with crossing guards. Agreements between the City of Santa Paula and the Santa Paula Unified School District for the provision of crossing guards. 3 crossing guards will be provided for this agreement. Staff recommends review and approval of the memorandum of understanding. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
I'd like to have Dr. Cora just state what's going on with that for the record.
Sure. First of all, I want to thank the City of Santa Paula for agreeing to work with us. It's got to be a two-way program. So the City of Santa Paula is willing to hire the company, and then we will hire the employees from the City of Santa Paula. And right now we have 3 locations. We have Barbara Webster, we have Ray Steele. And the last one we are considering Isabel School, but we want to also touch base with the City of Santa Paula Police Department to ask if there is a better 3rd location to set that 3rd crossing guard at. And also, we're looking at if the program goes well, because again, these funds come from LCAP funds designated for safety. We can take a look in the future safety LCAP funds to see if we can fund additional crossing guards after this year.
Glad to know this is on the agenda. All those voting for approval or okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes for approval of a memo of understanding crossing guards. Okay, action item 9G, approval to accept award of stop grant. Well, this is kind of nice because this grant has been awarded for the improvement of school safety through the development of either or both of the following activities. conducting school threat assessments, or developing multidisciplinary mental health intervention teams designed to identify school violence risk among students and implementing strategies to mitigate those risks. Do I have a motion to approve? Someone?
Second.
Any discussion?
I'd just like to thank our own employee, Captain and Gary, for writing these grants. We didn't need to pay a grant writer. Our employees are outstanding in that they know what we need, and it's very clear that they're capable of writing grants, so thank you.
If I can answer that, not only this item, but the next item as well, so thank you, Ms. Geary.
I'd like to take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Approval to accept another award of a stock grant for $150,000. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Resolution to 2019-20 Red Ribbon Week. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll second it. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. 9J, approval of purchase of maintenance and operation vehicles. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion to approve maintenance and operation vehicles of purchase of maintenance and operation vehicles passes 5-0. 9K, establish one new instructional assistant speech position at Webster, 5.5 hours per day. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? I'd like to take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. 9 now, establish one new instructional assistant speech position at Santa Paula High School in McKevitt, 5.5 hours per day. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second it. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. M, award of construction contract for the McKevitt electrical upgrade project.
I'd like to move to reject all bids.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Mrs. Colbert. 9N, quarterly report on Williams uniform complaints. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? None. Motion passes 5-0. Consent calendar. Do we have a motion to approve? I'll second it. Any discussion on consent calendar? Seeing none, I'll take a vote. How many in favor of the consent calendar?
Aye.
All those opposed? Consent calendar passes 5-0. Board member comments. Mrs. Colbeck.
I stopped in at the Barbara Webster celebration of their successes, and it was really exciting to see such happy faces. I didn't get to see the kangaroo, so I should have planned my day more accordingly, but maybe next time. As far as requesting, I'd like to request maybe, I don't know, tutorial or something for this new agenda online. Even the best of us are not very good at it, so I can't even imagine the public or Spanish-speaking families knowing how to even get to our agenda. So now you have to click 3 or 4 places. There's little And I know I've never been a real advocate of agenda online, but their new and improved agenda online, I need a must have been advocate. So I think we've got to come up with a tutorial, an explanation in Spanish so parents can actually see it on the website before they start clicking. It's unacceptable because agendas are supposed to be for the public. They're supposed to be, and even though we've followed the letter of the law, I think if you asked any person here if they had actually seen the agenda, they probably would not have read it. So it's just a suggestion. Secondly, I'd like to also, on future agenda items, I'd like to add that we consider the budget periodically. If, even though we do have a positive, it does not mean that we don't need to set our priorities. Thank you.
Mr. Luna.
I just want to thank the board for approving the crossing guard item tonight. I think it's going to be a successful thing here in the city, and hopefully a lot of drivers will slow down for these crossing guards. And I really want to thank the city of Santa Paula for partnering with us to enhance the safety of all students and families in the city of Santa Paula. So thank you very much.
If I can add to that very quickly, Mr. Luna, part of the stop grants I'm working with the City of Santa Paula Police Department, we're looking at through the stop grants or some other fundings for safety, looking at those speed boxes as you drive by, it shows you what you're doing and it flashes if you're going too fast. We're trying to work with the city to go half and half on several of those boxes in several locations, so that should also help.
Mrs. Neal?
First of all, I'd like to thank our student board member. Notes being printed out. She always has such a list that I try to write them down and get lost halfway through and miss the school. So that was nice to have those notes. So thank you for that. There's so many wonderful things happening month to month that it's hard to mention them all. The family conference was wonderful. That was fun to go to. That was my second meeting that week that I sat through in Spanish. So it was, I'm practicing. So it was wonderful to see the turnout. It was great. So kudos to Ms. Shefferly and Ms. Ramirez for doing that. And it was also fun in your board update, Dr. Cora, to see that the acknowledgement of two of our excellent high school teachers and Ms. Ramirez contributing to the Dr. Warner's. So that was fun. Makes us really proud of our staff. I want to thank the district for listing homework help free help at the library. The first day, we didn't push it out. The very first day, some people knew, and until the high schoolers show up, I didn't want to send it out to principals as a reminder, but 6 Eber high schoolers were there the first day. They always bring their own homework just in case some children show up. And on the second day, about 6 children, I pushed out to principals and to school districts, so thank you for putting it up on social media. And there were about 6 students there the next day, and 1 high schooler, it was her first year he's participated for community service. He said, this was a great first day. I thought, whoa, that was fun to hear. Also wanted to thank Ms. Shefferly for the special board meeting and all the data that you provided for us. It was a long meeting, but it was wonderful to hear. And especially, I know the one data that meant the most to me was that math data that was given at the very first. And when you said that the principals had a hard time with that, that's not what the results are for. What a gift to the teachers to know what was missing to help them build on that data for the next year. So thank you for that. If we get past the point of it's not about us, it's about the kids, and that gave information to the teachers, and that was wonderful. So thank you. And one last thing that I was made aware of today. Ned Branch at the library went to a Ventura County foundation meeting, talking about the 2020 census. And one of the things he said was that Santa Paula and Oxnard are one of the top 5 cities that are going to be that's projected to be underrepresented in the census. And for every undercount, the county loses $1,100 in services. So it's really important for our families here to be counted. And if there's any way that we can support that, with educate, with whatever, they're working on different ways to get out to families that is not connected with your citizenship, that is for public services. And for every house that doesn't participate, we lose as a county $1,100. So it's huge. And to hear that Santa Paula is going to be one of those top cities that are going to be, they think is going to be underrepresented, it's going to mean a lot to our families. So if there's anything we can do as a school district, if we can look into it, whatever, it is going to help our community. So I'd really like to look into that and maybe bring it up at the board meeting or whatever, of anything we can do. Thank you.
Can I ask for a contribution?
I don't know about a contribution, but I know I'm going to be working with Mr. Beery. I attended the meeting. It was in Camarillo. I can't remember the location, but I attended that meeting and I'll help out with what I can.
Mrs. Thompson? Yes, thank you. Well, I'd like to piggyback on what Mrs. Dean said about Natalie Rodriguez, our Commissioner of Activities. I was astounded by the number of things that are going on at all of our schools, and really positive things, at every single one of them. And I think that just speaks to the people who are charged, the teachers, everyone who's there. They're willing, and the coaches, to do things for the kids and make sure that there are plenty of opportunities for them and their parents. And then I'd like to say, and everybody around here is tired of hearing this story, but I'd like to share, because I know it's being recorded, that at the JV game last week, there was a sweet thing that I saw. The people that we played, the team that we played, was Nordhoff. And one of the Nordhoff players got injured. He seemed to be hurt pretty badly. He was laying on his back, and 2 of our JV Cardinals went over and squatted down by him and were comforting him. And one of them was even patting him on his helmet and talking to him, and until the coaches got over there. And even when the coaches got there, the captain of our team, number 44, Sean Petit, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, he escorted the young man along with the coaches back over to his sideline. And I just, that was an extraordinarily example of good sportsmanship. And I know the coaches at our high school are teaching that. My grandson also plays, and I hear from him how they talk to the kids and how they try to instill these things in them. And I just wanted to say, I texted Mr. Cora, Dr. Cora, and I told him about it because I was so proud. And I texted my fellow board members, and he said, I'd rather hear that kind of thing than hear that we won. And I said, that's really nice, but we did win too. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Thompson. It's never bothered you to hear a story that's impossible. Speaking of budget that Mrs. Colbeck mentioned, the Ventura County School Board Association will be conducting professional development for school board members on Monday, October 14th at 6 p.m. The topic will be the budget. And in fact, you're welcome to attend if you like. I know Mrs. Thompson and myself and Dr. Cora are going, but anyway, it seems to be a topic that we should be get a lot of information from. And yesterday I had an opportunity to visit the high school around 5:30 p.m. I visited the athletic department, and that high school is the most beautiful school around. The sun was setting, the football players were practicing out there, the polo team was in the pool. Everything, it felt so magical, it felt so beautiful that time of day, 5:30 p.m. And I was very grateful for my blessings at that time to experience our athletic program at its best. And with that, we have a future board meeting of October 23rd, and then our regular board meeting, November 13th. And this meeting is adjourned at 8:55 p.m. Oh! Oh, I really want to go.
No, he's gonna go down with you, and I'm gonna